Alara Donovan, 28, stood frozen outside her father's study, the words still echoing in her ears. "Your sister isn't worth a penny, she's done." Her own father had written her off completely. She'd always known he favored her brother Carson, but this was different. The inheritance meeting was tomorrow, and now she knew exactly where she stood in the family hierarchy. Little did her father know this moment would completely transform their family forever. Before I dive into the most painful betrayal of my life, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our storytelling family. I share new family revenge dramas every week that will leave you shocked at what karma can do when justice finally comes knocking. Now let's get into how I turned my father's cruel dismissal into the wake-up call our family desperately needed. I grew up in Mapleton, a small but affluent Connecticut town where everyone knew everyone's business, especially when that business involved the Donovans. My father, Richard Donovan, built his real estate empire from nothing, a fact he reminded us of daily. "I didn't have a silver spoon like you kids," he'd say, usually directed more at me than my brother. Carson was 4 years older, and from the day I was born, my father's unquestioned successor. Our mother, Eleanor, was the peacekeeper, constantly smoothing over the cracks in our family foundation with elegant dinners and charitable events. She'd whisper to me, "Your father loves you in his way, Alara," but even as a child, I knew what in his way meant, conditionally, reluctantly, and with constant comparison to Carson. Growing up, the differences in how we were treated weren't subtle. Carson received a BMW for his 16th birthday. I got driving lessons. He went to Princeton because Donovan men are Ivy League men. I attended State because it's practical for what you'll likely do. Every achievement of mine was measured against my brother's, and inevitably found wanting. Despite this, Carson and I were close, or I thought we were. We'd sneak out to the old boathouse at our summer home and talk about our dreams. Mine were always bigger than what Dad prescribed. I wanted to revolutionize urban housing, create affordable developments that didn't sacrifice quality. Carson would listen, nodding sometimes, taking notes in the little leather-bound notebook he carried. "You've got good ideas, Elle," he'd say. Maybe someday Dad will see that. I believed him then. I believed a lot of things. When I graduated with my master's degree in urban planning and development, top of my class, I thought Dad might finally see my value. I crafted a proposal for Donovan Developments, a new division focused on sustainable, affordable housing that would actually expand our market share while doing some good in the world. I spent months on research projections and a comprehensive business plan. The day I presented it at the family dinner table, Dad barely glanced at it before pushing it aside. "That's not what Donovan stands for," he said flatly. "We build luxury properties for people who can afford quality. Leave the affordable housing experiments to the government." Carson, who had recently been named Vice President of Operations, despite having less experience than most of the senior staff, said nothing. He just gave me an apologetic shrug as I gathered my rejected proposal. That night, my mother found me packing my car. "Where are you going, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm taking a job with Urban Future in Boston," I said. "They actually value innovative thinking." She wrung her hands, a nervous habit she'd developed over decades of playing mediator. "Your father will come around. He just needs time to see your vision. I've given him 26 years, Mom. I'm done waiting for his approval." I left that night ignoring my father's calls, demanding I stop this childish tantrum. I didn't speak to him for nearly 2 years. During that time, I thrived at Urban Future, developing award-winning projects that transformed neglected neighborhoods into vibrant communities. Every award, every piece of recognition felt like vindication. I sent the press clippings to my mother, who proudly displayed them, despite Dad's disapproval. Then Eleanor Donovan was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer, and suddenly family feuds seemed petty and insignificant. I moved back to Mapleton, temporarily renting a small apartment downtown rather than returning to the family estate. Every day I'd visit Mom at the hospital or at home during her brief periods of remission. Dad and I maintained a cold civility for her sake. Carson played the dutiful son, managing both the company and family matters with apparent ease, though I noticed the strain around his eyes. When Mom passed 6 months after her diagnosis, something shifted in our family dynamic. Dad became more withdrawn, more focused on his legacy. Carson seemed constantly on edge, checking his phone nervously during the funeral, disappearing for long business calls. In the wake of Mom's death, I decided to extend my stay in Mapleton. Not for Dad, not even for Carson, but because something felt unfinished. Like Mom's death had exposed fault lines in our family that needed to be addressed before I could truly move on. Little did I know that beneath the surface of our carefully maintained family image, secrets were stirring that would shatter everything I thought I knew about the Donovans. It was 3 months after Mom's funeral when I first noticed something wasn't right with the family business. I'd maintained my distance from Donovan Developments, focusing instead on remote consulting work for Urban Future, but Carson had been acting strangely, canceling our weekly dinners, looking haggard, drinking more than usual when we did meet. "Is everything okay with the company?" I asked during one of our rare dinners. Of course, he answered too quickly. "Dad's just been more hands-on since Mom died. You know how he gets." I did know. Dad's way of handling grief was to control everything around him with an iron fist. Still, something in Carson's tone made me suspicious. That weekend, I visited Mom's grave with fresh flowers. To my surprise, I found our family attorney Martin Wells at the cemetery as well, standing before a different grave. Martin I called, approaching him after he'd finished his respects. He startled slightly. "Alara, lovely to see you." We chatted briefly about Mom, about how the family was coping. Then hesitantly he asked, "Have you been involved in any of the recent company decisions?" "You know Dad would never allow that," I said with a small laugh. Martin's expression tightened. "Perhaps you should take an interest." Family businesses require family vigilance. Before I could press him for details, he excused himself, but his cryptic warning lingered. That night, I called my old college roommate Zoe, now a financial journalist with a talent for digging up corporate dirt. "Can you look into Donovan Developments for me?" Off the record, I added quickly. "Investigating your own family business." "This sounds juicy," Zoe replied. "Give me a week." It took her 3 days to call me back. "You need to come to my office." Now, Zoe's office was her apartment in Hartford Walls, covered in notes and printed articles. She had 3 computer monitors displaying different sets of data. Without preamble, she handed me a folder. Donovan Developments has been quietly selling off assets and moving money through a series of shell companies, she explained, as I flipped through spreadsheets and bank records. And guess who's the primary beneficiary of these transactions? I didn't need to guess. The name Carson Donovan appeared repeatedly throughout the documents. "He's embezzling," I whispered, the reality sinking in. "But why? The company is successful. He stands to inherit everything anyway." Zoe pulled up another screen. "Because Donovan Developments is in trouble. Your father made some high-risk investments that tanked last year. The company's over-leveraged, and they've been hiding losses from shareholders." I stared at the evidence, my mind racing. "Does Dad know what Carson is doing?" "That's the thing," Zoe said, pulling up an email chain. "These communications suggest your father authorized it, initially a temporary measure, to keep the company afloat. But Carson went rogue. He's been siphoning off much more than the authorized amounts and hiding it from your father." I felt sick, not just at Carson's betrayal of Dad's trust, but at the realization that my father had approved financial deception in the first place. The Donovan empire, which he'd built on his supposed integrity and business acumen, was rotting from within. "There's more," Zoe said quietly. I found references to something called Project Lazarus. It seems to be a plan to liquidate the company's remaining viable assets, declare bankruptcy on terms favorable to certain secured creditors, companies that appear to be controlled by Carson, and then rebuild a new company from the ashes, leaving the other shareholders and creditors with nothing. Including Dad, I realized Carson's planning to push him out completely. I left Zoe's apartment with copies of Everything My Mind in turmoil. Part of me wanted to let them destroy each other. Dad had made it clear I wasn't part of the Donovan legacy. Why should I care if that legacy crumbled? But another part of me, the part that still remembered my mother's belief in family above all, couldn't stand by and watch this implosion. I decided to confront Carson first. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe Zoe had misinterpreted the evidence. Maybe my brother wasn't betraying our father and everything our family stood for. I invited him to lunch at a quiet restaurant downtown, away from both our family's usual haunts and the Donovan offices. He arrived late, already slightly buzzed from a client meeting. "I know about Project Lazarus," I said without preamble once our drinks arrived. Carson's face drained of color. He glanced around the restaurant nervously before leaning in. "How could you possibly? It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that you're not just embezzling, you're planning to tank the entire company and leave Dad with nothing." "You don't understand," L. Carson hissed. "Dad's decisions have put us on this path. I'm just making sure I don't go down with the ship. And what about all the people who work for Donovan? The families that depend on those paychecks?" Carson laughed bitterly. "Now you care about Donovan developments. After you walked away, after you rejected your legacy, I rejected Dad's vision for me, not my responsibility to do what's right," I countered. "What's right?" Carson mimicked. "Always so self-righteous. You know what Dad calls you, his bleeding heart disappointment. While you've been off playing savior to the poor, I've been shouldering everything, his expectations, his criticism, the burden of the company." I sat back, stunned by the venom in his voice. "I thought we were on the same side, Carson. We were kids then, Elle. This is business. Dad taught me that family and business are the same thing. It's about protecting what's yours. And after everything I've given to Donovan Developments, I've earned the right to save myself." As I stared at my brother, this stranger wearing Carson's face, I realized how deeply resentment had corrupted him. He'd internalized all of Dad's worst lessons while discarding the values Mom had tried to instill in us. "I'm going to Dad with this," I said finally. Carson's expression hardened. "He won't believe you over me. You're the outsider now, remember? The one who abandoned the family." As he walked out, leaving me with the check in more ways than one, I knew he was probably right. Dad had always taken Carson's side. But I had something Carson didn't know about evidence. Cold, hard, irrefutable evidence. I just had to hope it would be enough to make my father see the truth about his golden child. The Donovan estate looked exactly as it always had: manicured lawns, imposing stone facade, the family crest above the front door. Yet, as I drove through the gates, it felt like I was entering enemy territory rather than coming home. I'd called ahead, asking for a private meeting with Dad. His secretary, still Linda, after all these years, had sounded surprised but scheduled me in for 7 p.m. after business hours. "Your father says to meet him in his study," she'd added. "The inner sanctum, where all important Donovan decisions were made." Dad was at his desk when I entered, not bothering to stand. At 65, Richard Donovan still cut an imposing figure, silver-streaked dark hair, piercing blue eyes that had lost none of their sharpness, shoulders straight beneath his custom suit. "Alara," he said, my name sounding formal on his lips. To what do I owe this unexpected request? I placed Zoe's folder on his desk. The truth about what's happening at Donovan Developments? His expression didn't change as he opened the folder, but I saw his knuckles whiten as he gripped the pages. For 30 minutes, I walked him through everything: the embezzlement, the shell companies, Project Lazarus. I showed him bank transfers, email exchanges, corporate filings. When I finished, the silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Dad closed the folder. "And how did you come by this information?" His voice was dangerously calm. "Does it matter? It's all verifiable." "It matters because this is a family matter. And you stopped being part of this family's decisions when you walked out 2 years ago." I stared at him in disbelief. "Did you hear anything I just said? Carson is stealing from you. He's planning to destroy everything you've built." Dad stood walking to the window that overlooked the gardens where Mom had spent so much of her time. What I hear is a daughter who's jealous of her brother's position, trying to drive a wedge between us with these allegations. Allegations I just showed you, concrete evidence. You showed me financial transactions you don't understand and communications you've interpreted through your own biased lens. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Call Martin Wells then. Ask him what he knows about Project Lazarus." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Dad's face, but it was quickly replaced by his usual stern resolve. "I don't need to involve our family attorney in this nonsense." "Then check the records yourself. Look into the shell companies, verify the transfers." Dad turned to face me fully. "Enough? Carson has explained the restructuring to me. Yes, it's aggressive. Yes, some of it pushes legal boundaries, but it's necessary given the current market conditions." "He's lying to you," I said, my voice breaking with frustration. "He's setting you up to take the fall while he walks away with millions." Dad slammed his hand on the desk. "Carson has dedicated his life to this company, to this family. While you've been off pursuing your own interests, he's been here learning, working, carrying on the Donovan name with pride." Each word felt like a physical blow. After everything I'd just shown him, he was still choosing Carson's lies over the truth I'd laid bare. "Dad, please, I tried one more time. Just look into it. For Mom's sake, if nothing else, she would want you to know the truth." His face hardened at the mention of Mom. "Don't you dare use your mother to manipulate me. Eleanor coddled, you made excuses for your lack of commitment to this family. Perhaps if she'd been firmer, you wouldn't have turned out to be such a disappointment." I recoiled as if slapped. Even for Dad, this was cruel. "Get out," he said coldly. "And take your accusations with you. If you can't support this family properly, at least have the decency not to try and tear it apart with lies." Numbly, I gathered the documents he'd dismissed. As I reached the study door, it swung open to reveal Carson, his expression a mixture of triumph and feigned concern. "Everything okay in here?" I heard raised voices. Dad sighed heavily. "Your sister has some concerns about the company restructuring." "Unfounded concerns." Carson's eyes met mine, and I saw something there I'd never seen before from my brother, pure unmasked contempt. "I was just leaving," I said quietly. As I walked past Carson, he gripped my arm, leaning in to whisper, "I told you he wouldn't believe you. Know when you're beaten, Elle." I pulled away and continued down the hallway, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor. I was almost to the front door when I heard them voices drifting from Dad's study, the door still partially open. I hesitated, then silently moved closer. "She's always been jealous of you," Dad was saying. "Even as a child, always competing for attention." "She means well," Carson replied, his voice the perfect blend of reasonable and dismissive. "But she's never understood our world, Dad. The business, the pressures, what it takes to succeed." "No," Dad agreed. "She hasn't. That's why I've decided to make it official at tomorrow's board meeting. The new corporate structure will name you as my sole successor with full control of all family holdings. It's time to formalize what we've always known." There was a pause then. Carson asked, "What about Alara's share of the family trust?" "Mother always intended for her to," Dad cut him off. "Your sister isn't worth a penny she's done. The family assets stay with those committed to the family legacy. I must have made a sound because both men suddenly went silent. Then footsteps approached. I quickly retreated down the hall and around the corner, my heart pounding. I waited until I heard the study door close firmly before making my way out of the house. In my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I finally allowed the tears to come, not just for this final betrayal, but for the realization that I'd been fighting for a family that had never truly existed. Dad had made his choice. He'd chosen Carson's lies over my truth. He'd chosen to believe what he wanted to believe, regardless of evidence. And now he was going to pay the price for that willful blindness. As I drove away from the estate, a strange calm settled over me. I'd done what I could to warn him. What happened next would be on his own head and on Carson's, or so I thought. But fate and my mother's foresight had other plans. I'm sure many of you have experienced that moment when someone you trusted betrays you so completely that it leaves you breathless. Have you ever faced a situation where your own family refused to believe the truth, even when it was right in front of them? Drop a comment below, sharing your experience. Your stories help others feel less alone in these painful family struggles. If you're enjoying this journey of betrayal and eventual justice, please hit that like button to help others find this story too. Now, let's continue to the moment when everything I thought I knew about my family was about to change forever. The next morning, I woke to a text from Martin Wells. Need to speak with you urgently. My office, 9 a.m. Martin's law office occupied the top floor of one of the few modern buildings in Mapleton's historic downtown. His assistant showed me directly to his private conference room, where Martin waited with a stack of folders and a grave expression. I heard about your confrontation with your father and brother, he said, gesturing for me to sit. Word travels fast in this town, especially when it involves raised voices at the Donovan estate. I felt a flush of embarrassment. I tried to show Dad what Carson's been doing, but he refused to see it. Martin nodded. Richard has always had selective vision when it comes to Carson. It's one of his greatest weaknesses as a businessman and as a father. So you know, about the embezzlement about Project Lazarus, I've had my suspicions for some time. Your mother did too, toward the end. I stared at him. Mom knew Martin's expression softened. Eleanor was much more perceptive than anyone gave her credit for. She saw the changes in Carson, noticed the discrepancies in the company reports. She came to me with her concerns 6 months before she passed. He slid a folder across the table. Your mother amended her will, Alara. She created a separate trust in your name, one that Richard and Carson know nothing about. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Inside was documentation for the Eleanor Donovan Trust, with assets valued at approximately $18 million, Mom's personal inheritance from her family, along with shares in Donovan Developments that Dad had transferred to her name early in their marriage. She made me the trustee with instructions to inform you of its existence only if certain conditions were met, Martin continued. One of those conditions was if Carson ever attempted to exclude you from your rightful share of the family business. I looked up from the documents, tears blurring my vision. She was protecting me. She was ensuring justice. Martin corrected gently. Eleanor believed in balance. She knew Richard favored Carson, so she created a counterweight. As I flipped through the trust documents, a small handwritten note fell out Mom's elegant script on her personal stationery. My darling Alara, if you're reading this, then Martin has determined that the safeguards I put in place for you have become necessary. I've watched you struggle for your father's approval your entire life, and my greatest regret is that I couldn't make him see your true value. You have a vision and integrity that this family desperately needs, even if they don't recognize it. This trust is not just about money or shares. It's about giving you the power to protect the Donovan legacy from itself if necessary. Use it wisely, use it justly, and remember that true family wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in decency. All my love, Mom. I pressed the note to my chest, feeling closer to her than I had since her death. After a moment, I looked up at Martin. What exactly does this trust give me the power to do? Martin smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. That's the interesting part. Your mother's shares combined with these particular assets give you effective veto power over any major restructuring of Donovan Developments. Carson can't execute Project Lazarus without triggering clauses that would expose the entire scheme. Does Dad know this? No. Richard was always disinterested in the details of Eleanor's financial arrangements. He trusted her to manage her family's money as she saw fit. I sat back, mind racing. So Carson's plan is already doomed. Not exactly, Martin cautioned. If they discover the trust's existence, they could find ways around it. Legal challenges, corporate maneuvers. The trust gives you leverage, not absolute protection. And there's another problem. He pushed a second folder toward me. These are the most recent financial statements for Donovan Developments that I could access. Carson wasn't entirely lying about the company's situation. Your father's investments have put the company in a precarious position. Without significant restructuring or new capital, Donovan Developments could face serious trouble within months. I spent the next hour poring over the financial statements, with Martin identifying exactly where the company was vulnerable and where Carson had been siphoning funds. The picture that emerged was both worse and more complicated than I'd initially understood. Carson isn't just stealing, I realized. He's deliberately weakening specific parts of the company to make his takeover easier. Precisely, Martin agreed. It's actually quite brilliant in a ruthless way. He's ensuring that when the company needs salvation, his shell companies will be perfectly positioned to provide it on his terms. I thought of all the employees who would lose their jobs, the local businesses that depended on Donovan contracts, the community projects that would collapse if Carson succeeded. This wasn't just about my father's legacy anymore, it was about all the lives that would be affected. I need to stop him, I said firmly, not just expose him, but save the company too. Martin regarded me thoughtfully. That would require a comprehensive counter-strategy. Financial resources, business allies. Are you prepared for what that means? Coming back to Donovan Developments, working with Dad after everything he's said. Possibly, though there might be another way. Martin opened his laptop. Your urban development projects in Boston have garnered quite a reputation. Your approach to community-integrated business models has impressed a lot of forward-thinking investors. He turned the screen to show me a business news article featuring my latest project, a mixed-use development that had transformed a struggling neighborhood while maintaining affordability for original residents. I've had inquiries, Martin continued, from investors interested in your work, people who might be willing to back you in a larger venture, people who would see value in acquiring a company like Donovan Developments and reimagining it under new leadership. I stared at him, understanding dawning. You want me to orchestrate a takeover of my own family's company? I want you to consider all options for saving what's worth saving, Martin corrected. Your mother believed in your vision, Alara. She provided these resources because she trusted you to use them wisely. For the next several hours, Martin and I outlined a strategy. It was audacious, complex, and would require perfect timing. I would need allies both within Donovan Developments and in the wider business community. I would need to move quickly before Carson could execute his plan or discover my mother's trust. Most challenging of all, I would need to decide how much to tell my father. Despite everything, I still held out hope that he might finally see the truth about Carson, about the company, about me. As I left Martin's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Zoe, found more on Project Lazarus. Meet tonight, I texted back, yes, and I need your help with something bigger. By midnight, Operation Phoenix was born, named in deliberate contrast to Carson's Project Lazarus. While his plan would destroy to rebuild, mine would transform and renew. I would need every skill I'd developed, every contact I'd made, and every ounce of courage I possessed. The next morning, I walked into Donovan Developments for the first time in over 2 years. The receptionist nearly dropped her coffee when she saw me. "I'd like to see my father," I said calmly. "Tell him Alara is here about the future of the company." As I waited in the lobby, surrounded by photos of Donovan projects, monuments to my father's vision, I felt a strange sense of homecoming. Not because this place had ever truly been my home, but because I was finally ready to claim my place in the Donovan legacy, just not in the way anyone expected. The elevator dinged and Carson emerged, his expression shifting from surprise to wariness when he saw me. "Alara, what an unexpected pleasure." "Hello, Carson," I replied evenly. "I'm here to speak with Dad. He's quite busy today." "Board meeting preparations, you understand?" "I understand perfectly." "That's exactly why I'm here." Before Carson could respond, the receptionist's phone rang. She listened briefly, then looked up. "Miss Donovan, your father will see you now." As I walked past my brother toward the elevator, I saw something flicker in his eyes, the first hint of genuine uncertainty. Good. It was time for the Donovan men to learn that they'd underestimated the Donovan woman for the last time. I've learned that sometimes, just when you think you're completely alone, you discover someone was looking out for you all along. My mother's secret protection changed everything about how I approached this family betrayal. Have you ever discovered that someone was quietly supporting you behind the scenes? Or maybe you've been that silent guardian for someone else? Share your story in the comments. If this revelation has you wondering what happens next, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss how this family drama unfolds. Now let me tell you about the moment I walked into my father's office with a completely different kind of power. Dad looked older than he had the night before, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. He was a man watching his life's work teetering on the brink, even if he wouldn't admit it. "You've got 5 minutes," he said, without preamble. "I have a board meeting to prepare for." "I know about the board meeting," I replied, taking a seat without being invited. "You're announcing Carson as your sole successor and restructuring the company under his guidance." Dad's eyebrows rose slightly. "You seem well informed for someone who's been out of the family business for years." "I've never been out of the family business," I countered. "I've just been approaching it from a different angle." I placed a folder on his desk, not the evidence against Carson this time, but the prospectus for my most successful urban development project. While you've been focusing on luxury developments with diminishing returns, I've been pioneering a new model that's both profitable and sustainable. Dad glanced at the folder without opening it. "If you're here to pitch your charitable housing ideas again, my last project returned 22% to investors while creating lasting community value," I interrupted. "How are your luxury developments performing? 15%, 12%, or are they now in the single digits as the market continues to soften?" This got his attention. Dad had always respected numbers, if nothing else. "What's your point, Alara?" "My point is that Donovan Developments is in trouble, and not just because of Carson's embezzlement. Your business model is outdated. The market has shifted. You need new direction." "And you think you're the one to provide it," Dad scoffed. After walking away, "I think I have solutions you need," I said simply. "And I think, deep down, you know it." Dad studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A seat at the table." "Literally." "I want to present an alternative restructuring plan at today's board meeting." Dad barked a laugh. "Absolutely not. The agenda is set. The decisions have been made." "Then unmake them," I challenged. "Unless you're afraid my plan might actually be better than Carson's." It was a direct appeal to his competitive nature, and I saw it hit home. Dad had never been able to resist a business challenge, You have no standing to present to the board, he said, but his tone had shifted from dismissal to consideration. Actually, I do. This was the moment of truth. I control enough shares through Mom's trust to require a hearing. Dad's face went slack with shock. What trust? I explained the Eleanor Donovan trust as concisely as possible, watching the emotions play across his face, disbelief, anger, and finally a reluctant respect. Eleanor did this. Without telling me she was protecting the company, I said, softening my tone. She saw what was happening with Carson before either of us did. Dad's jaw tightened. I still don't believe. You don't have to believe me about Carson, I interrupted. Not yet. Just let me present my plan. If the board doesn't think it has merit, you lose nothing. If they see value in it, the company benefits. Isn't that what you've always claimed to care about most? The good of Donovan Developments, I could see him calculating, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded curtly. Fine. You'll have 15 minutes at the end of the meeting, but I'm making no promises beyond that. That's all I ask, I said, standing to leave. Oh, and Dad, don't tell Carson I'm coming. I'd like my presence to be a surprise. Back in the lobby, I texted Martin to set the next phase in motion. Then I called Zoe. Everything's set on my end, she reported. The investors are intrigued by your proposal. They're ready to move if the board meeting goes as planned. And the other matter, I asked. All the documentation on Carson's embezzlement and Project Lazarus has been organized and verified. It's ready to present if needed. Next, I contacted Lydia Chen, Donovan's chief financial officer and one of the few executives who had always treated me with respect. She had agreed to meet me for coffee before the board meeting. Your timing is impeccable, Lydia said, after I'd outlined my concerns about Carson's activities. The finance team has been raising red flags for months, but your father dismisses our concerns. And Carson has been systematically removing anyone who asks too many questions. Are you at risk? I asked. Lydia smiled thinly. I've survived 30 years in corporate finance as a woman of color. I know how to protect myself. I've been keeping my own records, documenting everything. But I can't act alone against the Donovan men. You're not alone anymore, I assured her. Are you willing to support my alternative proposal at the board meeting today publicly? Lydia considered this. It would be a significant risk. I understand if you can't. I didn't say I wouldn't do it, she interrupted. I said it's a risk, one worth taking, I think. This company has been my life's work too, Alara. I won't watch Carson drive it into the ground for his own gain. By 2 p.m., my allies were in place. Martin had reached out to sympathetic board members. Zoe had her evidence ready to present. Lydia had prepared supplementary financial projections supporting my plan. And I had spent hours refining my presentation, a comprehensive strategy to save Donovan Developments by pivoting toward a more sustainable community-integrated model while maintaining the company's reputation for quality. The board meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. At 2:45, I entered the Donovan Developments headquarters through a side entrance Lydia had arranged. She met me in a small conference room adjacent to the main boardroom. The board members are arriving, she reported. Your father and Carson are greeting them personally. Is everything ready in the boardroom? I asked, smoothing my charcoal gray suit, a deliberate choice almost identical to the style my father favored. Yes. I've uploaded your presentation to the system. It will appear as soon as you give me the signal. Lydia handed me a remote. This will advance the slides. At exactly 3 p.m., the board meeting commenced. Through the thin wall, I could hear my father's authoritative voice opening, the proceedings followed by Carson's smoother tones as he began his presentation on the exciting new direction for Donovan Developments. Lydia slipped into the boardroom while I waited, my heart pounding. 20 minutes later, she returned. They're about to vote on Carson's restructuring plan. It's time. I took a deep breath and followed her to the boardroom doors. As I entered, all heads turned. The surprise on the board members' faces was evident, but nothing compared to the shock on Carson's. Alara, Dad said stiffly, "You're late." "Actually, I'm right on time," I replied, walking confidently to the front of the room. "Members of the board, before you vote on the proposed restructuring, I'd like to present an alternative vision for the future of Donovan Developments." Carson recovered quickly. "This is highly irregular. The board agenda was set, miss." "Donovan has shareholder standing to present," Martin interrupted smoothly from his seat at the table. "As the trustee of the Eleanor Donovan Trust, which holds significant company shares, I've authorized this presentation." The next 15 minutes were the most important of my professional life. I outlined my plan with precision and passion, a strategy that would honor the Donovan legacy of quality while expanding into new markets with innovative, sustainable developments. I showed how my approach would not only resolve the company's current financial struggles, but position it for growth in emerging markets. When I finished, the boardroom was silent for a moment. Then Walter Chen, Lydia's husband and a long-standing board member, spoke up. "This is a compelling vision, Miss Donovan. But how do you propose to finance this transition? The company's reserves are limited at present." "I've secured commitments from a consortium of investors who specialize in sustainable development," I replied. "They're prepared to provide capital in exchange for a minority stake, leaving control firmly in Donovan hands." "This is absurd," Carson interjected. "She's been gone for years, and now she waltzes in with some half-baked plan and mystery investors. Meanwhile, I've been here every day, working alongside Dad, making the tough decisions, like the decision to embezzle company funds," I asked quietly. The room went still. Carson's face flushed red. "That's a libelous accusation." "It's a documented fact," I countered, nodding to Lydia, who distributed folders to each board member. "These records show systematic fund diversion from Donovan accounts to shell companies controlled by Carson Donovan. They also outline Project Lazarus's Carson's plan to deliberately bankrupt the company and rebuild it under his sole control, leaving other shareholders, including Dad, with nothing." Carson turned to our father. "Dad, you can't believe this. It's a desperate ploy. Is it true?" Dad asked, his voice deadly quiet as he flipped through the documents. "Of course not." Carson protested, but his eyes darted nervously around the room. "Miss Chen," Dad addressed Lydia. "As CFO, can you verify these allegations?" Lydia stood her posture impeccable. "I can. My team has been tracking these discrepancies for months. I've included our internal audit findings in your packets. They corroborate Miss Donovan's evidence." What followed was the most painful hour of our family's history, a methodical dismantling of Carson's schemes, with multiple executives confirming different aspects of the evidence. Throughout it all, Dad's expression grew increasingly stony, while Carson's desperate denials gave way to seething silence. Finally, Dad called for a brief recess. As the board members filed out, he remained seated, staring at the papers before him. "I'd like to speak with my children alone," he said without looking up. When the room had cleared, the three of us sat in silence for a long moment. Then Dad raised his eyes to Carson. "Why?" Carson's facade cracked. "You were going to lose everything anyway. Those investments in the Westlake project were a disaster, which I advised against," I interjected. "And someone had to salvage what could be saved," Carson continued. "You taught me to be ruthless in business, Dad. To put the bottom line first. That's all I was doing. By stealing from me, by planning to leave me with nothing," Dad's voice was hollow. "I would have taken care of you," Carson insisted. "Set you up comfortably in retirement. But the company needed younger leadership, fresh direction. So you could have come to me honestly," Dad interrupted. "Instead, you chose deception and theft." He turned to me. "And you chose to walk away entirely." "I walked away from a toxic dynamic, not from my responsibilities," I corrected. "And I came back when it mattered. I'm here now, offering a legitimate way forward. Dad looked between us, his expression unreadable. Finally, he stood. The board will reconvene in 5 minutes. I've made my decision. When the meeting resumed, Dad addressed the room with the commanding presence that had defined his career. Today has brought to light disturbing truths about the company's management and about my own failures of oversight, he began. It has also presented us with a critical choice about Donovan Development's future. He paused, looking directly at Carson. Carson Donovan is hereby removed from all positions within the company effective immediately. The evidence of financial malfeasance will be turned over to the proper authorities. Carson started to protest, but Dad silenced him with a raised hand. Furthermore, I am withdrawing my proposed succession plan. In its place, I recommend the board approve Alara Donovan's restructuring strategy with one amendment. He turned to me. I propose that Alara be named co-CEO, working alongside me for a transition period of 1 year, after which I will step down and she will assume full leadership of Donovan Developments. The shock must have been evident on my face because Dad's mouth twitched in what might almost have been a smile. It seems I have underestimated one child while overestimating the other. I intend to correct that mistake while I still can. The board voted unanimously to approve the new direction. As the meeting adjourned, Carson stormed out without a word. The other board members offered congratulations as they left until only Dad and I remained. Why the change of heart, I asked once we were alone. Dad sighed heavily. Your mother always said you had the true Donovan spirit, not just ambition, but vision. I was too stubborn to see it. He gestured to my presentation materials. This plan of yours, it's good. Better than good. It's the future I couldn't imagine but that the company needs. It wasn't an apology. Richard Donovan didn't apologize, but it was an acknowledgement. For now, that would have to be enough. We have a lot of work to do, I said, gathering my things. Yes, Dad agreed, we do. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of activity. Carson faced criminal charges for embezzlement and securities fraud, eventually accepting a plea deal that included restitution and a ban from serving as an officer in any public company. The family scandal made headlines briefly, but interest quickly shifted to our company's innovative new direction. Working alongside my father proved challenging but unexpectedly rewarding. Our styles clashed frequently, his traditional approach versus my community-focused vision, but these tensions often produced stronger solutions than either of us would have developed alone. You remind me of myself at your age, Dad admitted one evening as we reviewed plans for our first mixed-income development. The difference is you have a conscience to go with your business instincts. I get that from Mom, I replied. Dad nodded. She would be proud of what you're building here, prouder than she ever was of my glass towers and luxury condos. Gradually, Donovan Developments transformed. We maintained the company's reputation for quality while expanding into sustainable community-integrated projects that generated both profit and social value. Our investor consortium, impressed with early results, increased their funding, allowing us to scale more quickly than anticipated. The most surprising change, however, was in my relationship with Dad. As we worked together daily, the old dynamic slowly shifted. He began to listen to my ideas, to respect my expertise. I learned to appreciate his experience and business acumen. We would never have the easy, loving relationship I'd always craved, but we were building something that worked much like our new business model. 1 year after the fateful board meeting, true to his word, Dad stepped down as CEO, transferring full leadership to me. At his retirement party, he gave a speech that left me speechless. When I founded this company, I believed I was building a legacy for future generations. He told the gathered employees and business associates, "Somewhere along the way, I forgot what really matters in that equation. Not the buildings, not the profits, but the people who carry the vision forward." I nearly lost sight of the most qualified person to lead this company into the future because I was too blinded by traditional expectations. He raised his glass toward me. To Alara Donovan, who saved this company not once but twice first, from her brother's betrayal and then from her father's short-sightedness. Donovan Developments is now truly in the best possible hands. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Dad handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was Mom's favorite pen, a vintage Mont Blanc she'd used to sign all important documents. "She wanted you to have this when you took your rightful place," he said quietly. "I should have given it to you sooner." As for Carson, our paths crossed only once after his sentencing at a mutual cousin's wedding. He approached me during the reception, his former arrogance dimmed but not entirely extinguished. "Congratulations on your success," he said stiffly. "The business press can't stop raving about the new Donovan developments." "Thank you," I replied, unsure what else to say to the brother who had betrayed our family so thoroughly. After an awkward silence, Carson spoke again. "I underestimated you, Elle. I always thought your idealism was a weakness." "It turns out having principles is actually good business," I said. "Something Dad finally understood, too." Carson nodded, looking away. "Do you think... Is there ever a way back? Not to the company, obviously, but to..." He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. I understood what he was asking. Could he ever be part of the family again? Could he rebuild the trust he'd shattered? I don't know, I answered honestly. That depends on you, on the choices you make now. On whether you've really changed or just regret getting caught. "That's fair," he murmured. "More than fair, actually." As he walked away, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a quiet sadness for what our family could have been if ambition hadn't corrupted love, if competition hadn't overshadowed connection. 2 years after taking over as CEO, I launched the Eleanor Donovan Foundation, dedicated to developing affordable housing and community spaces in underserved neighborhoods. The foundation's first project was built on the site of an abandoned Donovan luxury development that had failed during the financial crisis, a fitting symbol of our company's transformation. At the groundbreaking ceremony, Dad stood beside me, visibly aged, but still commanding in his tailored suit. As we posed for photographs, shovels in hand, he leaned over and whispered, "Your mother would say this is worth more than all my skyscrapers combined." "Do you agree with her?" I asked, curious about his true feelings on our company's new direction. Dad considered the question, looking out at the community members who had gathered to celebrate the project, families who would soon have safe, beautiful homes they could actually afford. "I'm learning to," he said finally. "Some lessons take a lifetime to sink in. I'm just grateful I lived long enough to start understanding what really matters." As we turned the first ceremonial shovelfuls of earth, I thought about the words my father had spoken years ago. "Your sister isn't worth a penny she's done," and how completely that assessment had been proven wrong. Not through spite or revenge, but through staying true to my values and vision, even when no one else believed in them. I had proven him wrong, not by becoming like him or Carson, but by remaining steadfastly myself, the self my mother had always seen and valued even when no one else did. And that perhaps was the most satisfying victory of all. 5 years after taking the helm of Donovan Developments, I stood on the rooftop garden of our newest project, a mixed-use community in what had once been a neglected industrial zone. Below, residents tended to community garden plots, children played in a carefully designed green space, and local businesses thrived in the commercial units. The project had just won a national award for urban renewal, but that wasn't why I was smiling. My satisfaction came from knowing that families who had lived in this neighborhood for generations could remain even as the area improved. From seeing small business owners succeed in spaces they could actually afford. From creating beauty and function that served people of all income levels. Dad joined me at the railing, moving more slowly these days, but still sharp-minded. At 70, he had finally embraced retirement, though he remained on the board as chairman emeritus and still offered advice, sometimes even when I asked for it. "Not bad," he said, surveying the vibrant community below. "Not what I would have built, but better in many ways." Coming from Richard Donovan, this was effusive praise. "The quarterly numbers reflect that," I replied, knowing he still cared about the bottom line. "We're outperforming projections by 17%. Dad nodded appreciatively. "Your approach works. I was wrong to fight it for so long." He hesitated, then added quietly, "I was wrong about a lot of things, Alara." These moments of vulnerability from my father were still rare enough to catch me off guard. In the years since Carson's betrayal, our relationship had evolved into something I'd never thought possible, a partnership based on mutual respect, if not always easy affection. We both made mistakes, I acknowledged. But we found a better way forward. "You found it," Dad corrected. "I just finally had the sense to follow your lead." As we stood in companionable silence, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I checked it and let out a surprised laugh. "What is it?" Dad asked. "Carson," I said, showing him the screen. "He's starting a nonprofit focused on financial literacy and business ethics for at-risk youth." Dad raised an eyebrow. "Ironic. Or maybe genuine atonement," I suggested. "He's been volunteering with prison education programs since he completed his sentence. Over the past few years, Carson and I had cautiously rebuilt some semblance of a relationship. Not the easy sibling bond we'd had as children, but something more tentative and measured. He had seemed genuinely committed to making amends, not just to the family, but to society at large." "People can change," Dad said, surprising me again. "Look at me. Old dog, new tricks and all that." I smiled. "Some of your old tricks were worth keeping. You taught me persistence, attention to detail, strategic thinking, and your mother taught you how to use those skills for something beyond just accumulating wealth," Dad finished. "Together, not a bad education." Later that day, I visited Mom's grave, bringing her favorite lilies. It had become a ritual to share major company milestones with her, even if only symbolically. We won the Urban Development Award, I told her, arranging the flowers in the granite vase. The Eleanor Donovan Community Project was recognized for outstanding integration of social responsibility and business excellence. Your name is becoming synonymous with a new kind of development approach. The autumn breeze rustled the nearby trees, and I imagined it was her response. Dad's doing well. He actually admitted he was wrong the other day. I nearly fell over from shock. I smiled at the thought. And Carson, I think he's really trying to make amends. The brother I knew as a child is still in there somewhere beneath all the mistakes. I sat on the bench facing her headstone, enjoying the peaceful cemetery with its view of the town she'd loved. I wish you could see what's happened, Mom. Not just with the company or the foundation, but with us, the family. We're healing in our way. It's not perfect, but it's real. As I drove back to my apartment, I'd never moved into the family estate, preferring my own space downtown near the company headquarters. I reflected on the journey of the past 5 years. From the night I'd overheard my father dismissing me as worthless to becoming the leader who had revitalized our family company, the path had been neither straight nor easy. There had been setbacks and doubts moments when I questioned whether transforming Donovan Developments was even possible. There had been resistance from old guard executives and skepticism from industry peers who didn't believe our new business model could succeed. But with each successful project, each community positively impacted each quarterly report showing strong returns alongside social benefits, the doubters had grown quieter. Now, the same business publications that had once predicted our downfall were featuring us as case studies in progressive corporate transformation. More importantly, we were making a tangible difference in people's lives while maintaining a thriving business, proving that the two goals weren't mutually exclusive, as my father had once believed. That evening, I hosted a small dinner at my apartment for the core team that had stood by me from the beginning: Martin, Lydia, Zoe, and a few others who had risked their positions to support the new vision for Donovan Developments. To 5 years of proving the impossible is possible, I toasted, raising my glass. And to the woman who made it happen, Martin added. Eleanor would be so proud, Alara. Not just of what you've built, but of how you built it with integrity and purpose. After everyone had left, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city lights. In the distance, I could see several Donovan buildings, some from my father's era of luxury-focused development, others representing our new direction. Together, they told the story of our company's evolution, of my family's journey. The words my father had spoken all those years ago, "Your sister isn't worth a penny, she's done," no longer held any power over me. They had become merely the beginning of a story that ended very differently than he had imagined. I had proven him wrong, not through vengeance or bitterness, but by staying true to my vision and values. By building something that honored both my father's legacy of excellence and my mother's commitment to community. By transforming rejection into redemption for myself and unexpectedly for my family as well. The company that now bore my leadership was stronger than it had ever been, not despite its social conscience, but because of it. The family that had once fractured under the weight of secrets and betrayal was finding its way toward a new kind of connection, imperfect but honest. And I, the daughter once deemed worthless, had discovered my true worth, not in my father's approval or in outdated measures of success, but in creating positive change while remaining true to myself. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, leading with purpose, and transforming pain into possibility. It's proving wrong those who underestimated you, not by destroying them, but by creating something so undeniably valuable that they can't help but see what they missed. In the end, that's exactly what I did. I've shared my story of family betrayal, hidden strength, and ultimate redemption with you today. Have you experienced a moment where someone's lack of faith in you became the very fuel that drove you to success? Or perhaps you've witnessed karma deliver justice in your own life. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel for more real-life dramas with unexpected endings, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that being underestimated can sometimes be your greatest advantage. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey through family betrayal, personal growth, and the sweet satisfaction of proving your worth through success rather than spite. Until next time, remember that sometimes the people who believe in you the least can inspire you to achieve the most.